Okay, hey there. Thank you for tuning into Duck Bricks. I'm Chris, and welcome to our final January 1st, 2023 LEGO set review. This is the only Speed Champion set releasing on January 1st, although there are many more to come in March. It is set number 76917, featuring a vehicle from the second Fast and Furious movie. Continuing alongside a series of licensed LEGO Speed Champions cars, this is the third officially licensed Speed Champions car from a movie, starting off with the James Bond Aston Martin, which we can see if we come all the way around right here. This was our first official James Bond minifigure here as well, and then we got a set based off of the first Fast and Furious movie with Dom's Charger here, and now finally we have one more based on the second movie, so this will go along nicely with the rest of the movie vehicles. But for this set in particular, we'll be taking a special look at it. It retails for $25 US, like most of the other Fast and Furious cars and the other Speed Champions cars. And this one was actually fairly controversial when it first came out because there are a lot of open studs on the hood. When you look at a lot of the Speed Champions cars, a lot of them are really smoothly finished off. You don't see a lot of studs on the tops of the hoods whatsoever, so it was very strange to have a car that I guess you can see a couple here and there for some of these other cars, but to have one with so many studs did tend to stand out a little bit compared to some of the other vehicles, so we'll be taking a look at how this kind of stacks up against some of the other Speed Champions cars and what I think about the model as a whole. And so with that, let's jump right into the review of set number 76917. Okay, so here we have set number 76917, Too Fast, Too Furious Nissan Skyline GT-R R34. This will retail for $25 US when it releases on January 1st, 2023, and comes with our first official LEGO Paul Walker minifigure, as well as a nicely detailed rendition of the Nissan Skyline car. Now, I have been a big fan of Speed Champions ever since they debuted the 8-stud wide vehicles. I in fact didn't even used to collect the theme whatsoever until they started making the 8-stud wide cars, I believe around the start of 2020, and that was what really drew me into the theme, because these are just so detailed and they act as really good representations of the real-world vehicles, and it's just so impressive what can be done with just a few standard LEGO bricks nowadays. Now, for $25, this is about the same value as any other Speed Champions car, so I won't really be talking too much about value here. If you're okay with spending $25 on other Speed Champions cars, this one is really no different. There's nothing about this that makes it less valued or more valued than what it actually is compared to the standard price, and I have since come to accept the $25 price tag for cars like this, so in general it is totally okay. Now, the shaping of this car is interesting, and I will admit I am no car expert, but I do know that when images of this set first released, and you can actually see a picture of what the car is supposed to look like on the back of the box here, there were a lot of questions about why exactly the shaping was not entirely accurate. Now, if you look at the car itself, I think one of the biggest complaints that I do have about it, and I do think a lot of people have about it, is the prevalence of the very obvious LEGO studded surfaces on the front of the car. From some angles, it doesn't really make that big of a difference. Like from here, for instance, it's not that big of a deal, but especially from the top, the inclusion of just so many different studs feels very jarring to me, and especially when you compare it to some of the other Speed Champions vehicles, it feels that this is just not quite on the same level of detail. Now, I was trying to play around with this and figure out exactly how they could have rectified this, and honestly, I am no LEGO master expert. I'm not a master builder, so I do not really know of a way to have avoided this myself. Maybe you could have replaced at least this piece and this piece with tiles, but then you've got some essential stuff that attach things on the sides, and I don't really know what I would have done differently to kind of smooth this out. But as it is right now, these studs just feel very out of place. The one thing about the vehicle itself is that, again, you can see from the back of the box here is that the front has a very noticeable curve to it. Everything is angled and curved downwards, and they did try to kind of replicate this with the shaping of the vehicle here. It's just not quite done as good as I would hope. Now, what's interesting is that everything on the front here, including the sideways Nexo tiles and everything, all of this entire front assembly is mounted on a very, very slight angle. This entire assembly is its own thing, and each of these clip on, and it is at an angle. So they did try to get the angle, but for me it's just a little bit too subtle, and it feels that maybe they could have just made it a little bit more exaggerated or found out some sort of a way to make it continue alongside the entire car. Because as of right now, it feels that maybe there's some sort of angle to the middle part, But then you have a very obvious just rectangle here that just finishes off the studded side, and it almost makes this feel unfinished to me. Like there was supposed to be something on top of here, or something was supposed to be done to smooth this out, but it just wasn't quite finished. It's just not quite there. Otherwise though, the rest of the vehicle shaping is overall very good. Ignoring this front part here, if you look at the rest of it, the shaping of the vehicle is really accurate to the source material. One of my favorite things is the usage of these kind of neck bracket elements to have the very distinctive larger and smaller rear lights here. That is a very distinctive feature of the vehicle itself, and it's really cool how they were managed to include that sort of function here. They also, for the set, drum lacquered a number of pieces for the first time, like the exhaust nozzle here is using a Technic bushing, drum lacquered in silver for the first time. If you open up the windscreen, you have some specialized drum lacquered tube and kind of 1x1 with a bar connection elements here, also drum lacquered for the first time to serve as this kind of souped up modification engine here. And all in all, it does feel like a lot of care and attention went into replicating this vehicle and went into trying to create a real life Lego replica of it. It's just the front that feels like a little bit was missing. Now, one thing that I do want to say about this that was honestly a little bit disappointing to me about the building experience was the prevalence of stickers. Now, I personally do not mind stickers that much, but when you're asking me to put stickers on the inside of a curved piece here and the inside of an angle here at 90 degrees, and then do it again for this bar right here, things get a little bit more difficult. Now, the GT text there, thankfully, is printed, the GT-R. You can barely see it when the light is reflecting it, but there's the GT-R printed on that 1x3 tile. Thankfully, that is printed, so that is nice to see. But then there's a lot of details here, which typically Speed Champions does print. In previous sets, they have printed on this particular surface, but instead you have to put on these really, really tiny stickers, which are really hard to align correctly. I had to do it a few times to make sure that it was just stuck on there right, and that's not fun to have to fiddle around with these stickers too much there. And it feels very odd to me that typically for Speed Champions cars, you would expect there to be mostly printed detail, especially on pieces where it absolutely is going to be very difficult to put stickers on. But for whatever reason they chose not to do that. Maybe Lego doesn't know or have the technology to be able to print the undersides or insides of these kind of convex areas yet, so this is a little bit more understandable. It was still really hard to put the stickers on the front here, but it's understandable. But for stuff like this on the inside of the car, where you clearly have a piece that they have printed that smaller bit of the piece before, just feels like maybe they were skimping out a little bit on the budget for the set to not have that printed. Otherwise though, it is still really cool to me that Lego is giving us movie rendition vehicles of real-life movie vehicles. I think that is a wonderful idea for Speed Champions, and I really hope that this extends past what we've gotten so far in the James Bond Aston Martin and now the two Fast and Furious vehicles. I would love to see them do something like this for, say, the DeLorean, or the Batmobile, or Knight Rider's car. There's all sorts of different iconic media vehicles that could be done in this incredibly detailed format, and I feel like this is just the beginning of what could be a really fun lineup of Lego classic movie-style cars. Now, the minifigure itself, obviously minifigures are typically not the stars of the show when it comes to Speed Champions, but when you're depicting a movie character for the first time in Lego form, that changes a little bit. The minifigure of Paul Walker's character here has dual molded arms in the white and tan, which are going to be very, very useful. I do think we've gotten this color combo before, I might be wrong on that, but it's still really cool to get it, and the figure itself is honestly really accurate. It does do a really good job of replicating the likeness of the character here with the facial expression and the very simple t-shirt, which obviously will have a lot of usages just outside of this character as well. And overall, I'm very happy with the way the character came across, and it just fits right in perfectly in the car. Oddly enough, the one piece that was printed was this right here, other than the front piece. This back seat was printed. It was used only once, so I guess that they had the budget to print that. And what is very cool, the one thing I will say is very, very nice about this particular vehicle is that for the first time, Speed Champions designers have figured out the technology to print this little tiny bit of the wheel on a curve. You have it printed on the rim as well as this very small part here and on the back here. They have not done that ever before, and this is the very first set that actually has printing on the side here, which opens up so many more possibilities for what they could do with printing on this particular piece. I'm really happy they discovered the technology to be able to do that, and I can't wait to see what they'll do with it in future Speed Champions cars. So overall, for $25, the price of this is okay. The accuracy just feels a little bit off to me though, especially with regards to the studs on the front. It's just really the front, because everything else about the model is done really nicely. The inside detailing is really fun to be able to see these kind of souped up engine detailings in the metallic silver. Very cool to get special new pieces molded or kind of recolored in that particular color. And then of course you have all sorts of detail on the dashboard here. It's just the front of it where I feel like there was a good amount of engineering that went into making this ever so slightly curved. As you can see, this is curving just ever so slightly compared to the rest of it, and then it just is kind of thrown out by just having these studs being open here, which is just very strange to me. But overall, it's a good representation of the movie car, and I'm really curious to hear what other folks have to say about it. Again, I am not a car expert, so I'm sure that there are maybe many more inaccuracies here. One thing I forgot to mention is that they did make a brand new mold for the hubcaps there. That is very cool to see a new mold being done in the drum lacquered silver, but everything else about it is pretty standard for Speed Champions, fairly okay, other than just these very obvious studs here. Typically don't mind LEGO studs, but if you're trying to make a realistic style car, especially compared to other Speed Champions vehicles, this one just misses the mark for me in terms of the front piece. But let me know what you think in the comments below. This has been just my opinion, and I hope you've enjoyed this review of the Nissan GT-R R34 from the Too Fast, Too Furious movie. Okay, and with that, we've summed up our review of the Nissan vehicle from the second Fast and Furious movie. Let me know down in the comments below, what do you think of this model? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? And if you have any ideas, what modifications would you do to the front to remove the excess studs? Because there are quite a lot of studs on the front there, especially when looking at it from a top-down view. Still, this is a really impressive model to get, and I do really like that LEGO is giving us movie cars. Really hoping we'll see movie cars along this scale for other movies and franchises, but for now we'll have to wait and see if they have more in store for the future. That about sums up this review, and with that, we've summed up all of our early 2023 reviews. I hope you've enjoyed this month of a ton of reviews, and now we'll be back to your regularly scheduled content for the Duckbricks channel. Thank you all so much for sticking through it, and stay tuned for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. Bye for now.